One of the things that we have been talking about a great deal is also just the recent events that we have seen in New England and the shooting that happened in Rhode Island last week, which I know you're all very aware of. And one of the things that Abby and I have talked about, and we at the coalition have talked about, is recognizing how many students and families were impacted by that shooting in that moment when it happened in that hockey rink, but also the impact that they have felt they will be bringing back to their school settings and how schools are ready to respond to those students, support educators in those moments that are hard and long lasting. They don't go away once the incident is over, is critical. And it really made me appreciate that much more the importance of the conversation we would be having today. So, just with that as a bit of context setting, I really want again to appreciate Abby and thank you for being with us. And I also want to just give you a little bit of background about this incredible expert that we have joining us today. Abbey Clements is the executive director and co-founder of Teachers Unify to End Gun Violence and was an elementary school teacher for 32 years. And I bet you have lots of stories to tell about all of that experience. She and her then second graders are survivors of the Sandy Hook school tragedy on 12/14/2012. Since that fateful day, Abby has been a gun violence prevention activist. She is a strategic consultant on gun violence issues for the American Federation of Teachers, great friends of the coalition as well, and a member of the Enough Plays to End Gun Violence National Advisory Council. Abby has been featured in various events, publications, and documentaries, including the 2024 DNC Newtown If I Don't Make It, I Love You, Bullets into Bells, AFT Voices, USA Today, AARP, Share My Lesson, The Hill, amongst others. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Abby. And as a reminder, Abby will present. We will follow up with some prepared questions and then open it up to any questions from the audience. So please put your questions in the chat. And with all of that as background, I will pass it to Abby.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ruth, and thank you all for being on today. I don't know, in New England it does feel like a weird day 17,000 of being inside. And it's really nice to see some familiar faces. Um, Thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting me. Really, something like this is why we launched Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence, to raise the voices of teachers. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to try to share, see how this goes. Great. So as Ruth mentioned, I was an elementary school teacher for 32 years. Um, when my family and I, we were scoping out where to live after my husband was offered a job at Western Connecticut State University. We found this, beautiful town um, where I wanted the kids to go to the same school, be in the same school district where I taught for the first time, because I always taught in different districts. And I chose to teach. I had a few offers, and I chose to teach at Sandy Hook School. This is a picture of me in my classroom. Um, I feel like trying to lead up to the story of why Teachers Unify launched, it goes really fast to the tragedy. But I do want to say that I immediately knew I wanted to be a teacher when I left college and thought that I was going to be in the field of publishing. And after about like a month of that, it came to me that I wanted to be a teacher. So I went back to school and I loved it. I loved learning about kids. I love being around kids. Um, and so this is me in I was in this, my second grade classroom was the second room on the right. And so during that day, we um, huddled, right? You see that backpack. We huddled there as we heard 154 shots, all of them. I wanted to climb. You can't really see, but there's a table right here, and I wanted to climb up there and pull down the loudspeaker so that the kids wouldn't hear all of it. But I was afraid because there were windows behind me. Sandy Hook School is like a square, and there was a courtyard in the middle. My students are now turning 21 from that day. And one of the best things that came out of that, if you can say it like that, is that I am in touch with and get to follow a good handful of my students from that day. And it is one of my greatest honors to be able to do that. And I take great responsibility having survived it and what I had to deal with in terms of like the survivor guilt was that I wanted them to look at me and know that I was trying to do something about it. Because as they've grown up over these 13 years, they've seen these tragedies unfold over and over again. Um, so right after, um, I knew that I needed to deal with the trauma that was very, very real and the survivor guilt and figure out how I was going to continue teaching because many teachers who survive school shootings, they talk about like this need to be there, like you have purpose to be there for the kids after. Um, but in terms of what I knew, sort of the greater path forward for me was advocacy and the power of good clinical support, both personally and for the connection that I made with Columbine teachers who came to Newtown very soon after the tragedy. Two teachers came. They said they were going to be at this place. It was in the middle of a snowstorm. A few of us went, we sat around a table, and they kind of gave insight as to what we had ahead of us. And that has been a model that I knew I wanted to recapture somehow. So after the tragedy, I got very involved in advocacy. Mostly it was from my daughter, who was 16 at the time and in lockdown at the high school, and for a little bit didn't know if I was okay. I mean, class was okay. She was the one who led the family in advocacy, and I knew I was going to join her, but it was going to take a few weeks, a few months. I would literally drop her off to events, wait for her in the car, or kind of hide around a corner because I wasn't ready. But I knew I had to like get my house to get in order and be able to go back to school. But as soon as I did, and I went to one meeting, it was in Connecticut, and ended up going by myself because she couldn't join me, my daughter. And I knew immediately that this was my path forward. Sitting around with people who just, whether they'd been through it or not, there were other survivors there, dedicated their time that they could to make sure this wasn't going to happen again. Very much like what you all do in your spare time. So thank you for that. Um,
Abby,
yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We are getting a little bit of a box on our screen. I don't know if
Oh,
you're
what does
able,
that mean?
if you can address it, there's a gray box blocking some of the text. If you can't address it, it's fine. I just figured I would mention it in case it was
Okay.
something.
Is that any better? Actually, I can't see.
It's the same box,
It's
but you
the
know what, don't worry
same.
about it. We'll just move
Okay.
ahead
All
because
right, we'll go to the
it just
next
might be.
one then. Hopefully that'll work better. Can you all see this or no? I can't even see you. I don't even know.
We
There
can
you all
actually
are.
we can
I've
see
heard
this.
this happening on Zoom lately, so I don't know what it's
Okay.
about.
Yeah. So we'll just charge ahead. No worries.
Okay. Should I stop sharing or?
Nope, go ahead. I'm sorry for
Okay.
interrupting you.
No, no worries. Okay. So back to this. Basically, this slide is just a couple of pictures. And I just wanted to say that I loved joining Moms Demand Action and Everytown for Gun Safety. I was in the first Everytown Survivor Network class. I'm still in and grateful to be in the Survivor Network class. I actually met other survivors of school shootings and who are still who are now working with Teachers Unify. So I knew that like the power of being with other survivors, especially other school shooting survivors, and the power of collaboration, because I don't think we can address this issue by ourselves. And I loved being a volunteer leader. I learned so much about how to actually combine some of my like teaching. I worked on national trainings, and I loved organizing, trying to get folks engaged on this issue, trying to show that it's kind of fun to do gun violence prevention sometimes, and the power of just people's voices, like that this is an outrage that we allow guns to be the leading cause of death for children in America, that, you know, the statistics, too many people die every day, too many people witness it, and too many are impacted. It's a travesty that we allow this. So I've learned over almost a decade through a very like coordinated volunteer program, how to organize. But what was missing was the teacher voice. And every time there was yet another school shooting, every time there's another bad lockdown, every time I heard about like young kids getting access to a firearm, I thought, you know, I really need to start. Why isn't there a teacher org? And I tried to get some of the big orgs to you know, create like teacher arm of theirs. I was like, I will help, you know, hire me, let's do it. But it just wasn't happening. And I kept, you know, waiting until I knew what it would be. And I remember walking, you know, taking walks with my husband and talking about different visions that I had of what a teacher gun violence prevention organization would look like, and thought about it and waited and thought about it and waited. And then one day it was the Oxford, Michigan high school shooting in November of 2021. And I was in a text thread with Sarah Lerner here on the left in the picture, if you can see it, and Sarah Beth Rosenberg. Didn't even know them very well at all, just a little bit. Sarah is a survivor of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas tragedy, and Sarah Beth Rosenberg is a New York City activist. And it was that text thread that you all have had many times. Oh my God, there's another tragedy. Why are there no teacher? Where are the teachers? And why is there no teacher organization? It's like, you know, the hamster wheel again. And I asked them then in this text thread, I'm tired of waiting. Do you want to start an organization for teachers by teachers? And they are high school teachers. So like we had our handle, like by the end of the day, we had a survey going out. And that's how we launched Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence. So we just turned 4. I took a leave of absence last school year, and then asked them for a second year leave of absence because, I mean, why wouldn't they give that to me? And they said, no, why would we hold your seat? That was a long time ago, which I think is kind of fits with part of the narrative of what we expect teachers to do, people who have been impacted by gun violence at work and then who come back. So I decided to leave. And I am doing this now full time for the second year, about 18 months. Our mission is to empower educators and allies to demand that communities are safe from gun violence. I mean, educators are amazing multitaskers. They know kids best. They just have not been intentionally brought into this movement. And we consider ourselves a bridge connecting the education and gun violence prevention spaces. And these are some of the things that we're doing. I actually just added in law enforcement today, which if you would have suggested that I add that into a presentation even a month ago, I would have been like, why? But we just had an incredible conversation with Connecticut state police who were running trainings. And they literally said on the call, you are the piece that we're missing. we need teachers who get it to be part of their trainings so that teachers see us and know that we're all on the same page. So that was pretty much an eye-opener there. So I just included that in the litany of things that we do in trying to raise our voices and try to be a part of the decision making, whether it's school-based, state, you're happening in your town, and of course, beyond that. We have ambassadors, and in fact, DJ is here, is I consider ambassador of Teachers Unify, going around at conferences, a student in public health. We have former Teachers of the Year from different states, and even a former National Teacher of the Year who is part of our Speakers Bureau. And we really believe that secure firearm storage education is where we could have such impact. I imagine a day when a teacher can give out secure firearm information at a parent conference or at open house, just like a teacher does about grading policy. So we'll see if we get there, but that's what we're really working on right now. And now I want to get to the crisis intervention and support team. So when we launched Teachers Unify, as I mentioned, one of the important factors, pieces that we want to make sure were front and center of Teachers Unify is a task force of sorts. This is something that people have wanted for at least since Columbine. After the tragedy, I have evidence of emails to my union leadership begging for them to create some kind of a task force where we could go down and help communities who are impacted by gun violence in schools, whether it's just beyond the gates or actually in the schools, because we get it, we understand, we know what the aftermath is like for a teacher, for a school staff member. And so we launched it ourselves. And this is, get a little emotional looking at the picture. You can see. We are 11 school shooting survivors and clinicians. And I think the clinician piece, I know, Ruth, that's your background, is like a piece that we didn't realize was so integral at first. When we first launched, we met with survivors from the Uvalde tragedy. We met with and kept in touch with Oxford High School tragedy survivor teachers, but missing that piece of somebody who, a trauma expert, so that you're really taking care of the people who you want to take care of, and you're not doing some more harm, for sure. So we just met in November of 2025 in Philly, in person, to do some work together. Super proud of this team. We are talking to several different school districts, outside agencies, and as I mentioned, law enforcement, and also some national and local unions, to try to reach people. And I think reaching out, in fact, I have a call later this week with somebody from Seattle Public Schools because of a tragedy they just saw. So endured in the community. So we know what, not to know how everybody's response is, but to just be there as a support so that people have a way to communicate with people who get it and who understand some of what the road is in front of them, is like in front of them, and the challenges that the kids will bring. We felt like is really important. Okay, so there's a video coming up, and Ruth, please unmute. If it's not working, we'll just skip it. So let's see how this goes.
On December 14th, 2012, I walked into Sandy Hook School. Suddenly, a loud crash. 154 gunshots blaring. 20 beautiful first grade children and 6 of my beautiful colleagues were killed. They should still be here. Immediately after the Sandy Hook School tragedy, the best response and support for me personally and many of my colleagues was from a clinician who specialized in trauma and Columbine's teachers who came down to talk to us. Having shared lived experience, we had this natural bond.
My family's been through 2 school shootings. In the aftermath of the Columbine tragedy, I thought I was equipped to get through the difficult time ahead. I had no idea how far-reaching the trauma would be, and it ultimately impacted every aspect of my life. And I, if possible, would like to help others avoid making those same mistakes. But what they really need is that long-term support.
Teachers Unify to End Gun Violence is a bridge connecting the education and gun violence prevention spaces. There is no team like this.
Even though you go through something like this, like a school shooting with other people, it feels very isolating. We are unique because we are co-founded by teachers, 3 educators, 2 of whom are school shooting survivors. We bring that teacher voice that has always been missing from any conversation about gun violence. And we need to have a seat at the table to have a voice.
Teachers are on the ground floor. We see our students who are being impacted by all of these things every day. Gun violence impacts almost pretty much everyone on this earth. And important to know that you're not alone. Teachers Unify is about empowering teachers to let people know that they're not alone. We'll be here for them, not just one and done, but over an extended period of time.
Most importantly, we want folks to feel that they're part of something greater than themselves.
When we think about ending gun violence, what we're not thinking about is the power of school communities and what we can be doing right now. We're missing opportunities of education.
Thank you for listening to that. Last couple of slides. I'll go quick. I think I've been talking a lot. One of the things that we do is amplify quotes from educators to try to bring forward some of the experiences and feelings of teachers that we certainly don't know even the half of. And we have a microsite called Project Lockdown at projectlockdown.org that's focused on kind of like easily understandable information about secure storage. There are some powerful videos, things that people can bring to like a school board meeting or their community regarding or even their school districts, which is what we hope most, to get them to send out secure firearm storage information. And I believe that is it. We helped get New York City to send out secure firearm storage information last school year, but had a lot of trouble this year. So we're going to keep trying. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all again. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. That was just, I've seen that video before and it's still just so powerful. So thank you. You know, one of the things that I think about all the time in just my work with survivors is there's obviously great power in telling your story, but it's a lot. And I always feel like when someone shares their story with me, that they're giving me a gift of themselves. So I just want to say thank you for giving us the gift of your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we are going to move into some questions and really do want to encourage our folks who are joining us to put any questions that they have in the chat too, so we can include you in the discussion. We did have a few questions that we prepared in advance that we wanted to pose to you, Abby, but having this more as a conversation. And I was really struck when you talked about for you that you wanted your students to know that you were doing something about this issue. That you wanted them to see you being active in solutions. And that really resonated with me. Something I feel deeply as well. And so you shared a bit about how you came into this work and how much that informed you. But can you share a bit more about how that really led to the development of this crisis intervention support team model? And it just a bit more about that gap, which you touched on, that you were really looking to fill with that particular part of your work.
Thank you. The enormity of an experience now, obviously the scope of what we dealt with at Sandy Hook School was, you know, it's difficult to even express the challenges, of course, that you all know. But teachers across the country are dealing with gun violence on a daily basis, whether it's drills or they're worried about certain kids at home where there may be access to firearms that you know about, and there's nothing we can do about. And so what happens when something happens is that the efforts go, rightly so, to the families and to the students, but the teachers are often left to figure things out on their own. They're expected to come back the next day. I mean, there was a situation in Maryland earlier this month where a kid was shot in the bathroom, and the kids went to school. They went to school the next day. I can't even imagine. And then there was a power outage at the school the next day. I had somebody messaging me about it in real time. I couldn't even. So we just expect kind of this. Not only is there like a normalization in terms of like news, but in terms of like everyday life, you're just expected to go. And when this happens at work, it makes me so angry because this is the responsibility of the employer to take care of their employees. And it just, so that's where I feel like we could help, because we get it and we understand some of the things that they could be advocating for. For example, there was a school shooting earlier in the fall, and we were in touch with the union leader, like local union leaders. They were asking us about, what kind of MOU should they try to get? What are some of the services like and resources that teachers and school staff are going to need further down the line that they can't even imagine right now? So I think I know we can be so helpful in terms of like, what to expect, resources, so that, when they run out of sick days, we can help, we can intervene. Or when, they give a couple of extra sick days for 1 year, but you don't get them the next year. There are certain things we just like know what to expect where there's going to be a lack of focus, and we can really help with that. But mostly it's for that one-on-one. I had people to message when I was having a day, whether it was a very challenging confrontation with a parent who lost a child, or a drill or a threat. We had a lot of times that happens too after a school shooting. You have to deal with those, evacuations and drills. I had people to text who get it, outside of your family who you talk about this all the time, and you're like, thank you for loving me and like listening, but I know it would be nice if I diverted some of it to other people. So we want to be that kind of resource too.
And that's also just, I want to appreciate your work around narrative change and also acknowledge how you've changed my narrative around this. I had always talked about school shootings being so focused on the impact on our students. And, my relationship with you and following your work has made me become, or maybe change my language and change my thinking, and always wanting to acknowledge the impact on educators and staff, both in terms of the trauma that they experience from the shootings, from the threats, because those are also very traumatic. And then how are we supporting them and showing up for students too? So these two different pieces that you are trying to hold with that. So I just wanted to appreciate the way that you've impacted the narrative that I talk about, because I know that's a part of your work too. And the next question also really does focus on educators and their workplaces and school settings. And I want to acknowledge that educational settings are at a particularly precarious moment right now with funding cuts and changes in priorities and staffing and a lot of external stressors that are due to what's happening on a federal level. And I was wondering if you could say a bit more about what feels most urgent in your work right now, given that context.
It was like, I don't think the connections are as clear as they could be around the dismantling of the Department of Education and what that impact is on school communities in terms of the fear of increased gun violence. And so when I see some of those, when I see programs that are being eliminated, that are targeted, free breakfast, summer programs, support staff cuts, counselors, these budgets that are just, I don't know how they're going to staff a school around and have enough support. That's when we worry about the increase in gun violence. So I feel like our voice and is really important there, and to be able to like make those connections and make them clear for people in the education space and also the gun violence prevention space. Particularly, obviously, the over militarization, the militarization of ICE and the surveillance with masked, armed people, federal government agents, watching families and students, huge impact. So kids who aren't going to school because their parents are afraid are now at risk because they're further behind. And so it's just enormous. Again, I think I just want to scream about that, the guns everywhere agenda that like we've worried about as part of this, the power of the gun lobby and the messaging of fear, and like we're living it now.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that perspective in. It's so important that we acknowledge the fact that our students and our educators are also experiencing the trauma of what's happening on the federal level with ICE, and the violence that's been happening in communities is a part of that. So they're bringing that into the classroom too. Um, again, it's a segue to the next question, which is really about trauma-informed responses in school settings. And, when you think about a crisis event and what a trauma-informed response should look like, can you talk a bit about that and also touch on what you think might be missing from schools and those responses?
Yeah. And I see, Jonathan, your question too about Connecticut requiring trauma-informed crisis response drills. Unfortunately, kids are, now you have even more forces at them for increased fear and anxiety, which I think is so much a part of, sadly, of kids' lives these days. And so it's even more important that our drills and preparation are they're trauma informed. And there are many problems with this. Often they'll say that they are, and they're not. And they're and teachers are often not included in these in devising these plans, in understanding why we're doing what we're doing. And oftentimes, quite honestly, we don't even know what to do. And they think that we know where to hide, that they're being transparent, often not. You might have a flip chart in your class that tells you like what you do in certain situations, but we're not included. And so we're told what to do, or it's not even clear. So that is one priority for Teachers Unify, is to raise our voice, to be able to say to your principal, which is not always easy, especially if you don't have tenure in your state, or if you're not tenured. That comes with a lot of extra, especially with the micromanaging that's going on. You can't even read certain books or have certain books in your library, let alone be expected for a teacher go and say, our drills are not really great right now. But oftentimes, kids with disabilities are not there's not a clear plan for them in terms of like how I had a kid on crutches. The last year I taught, and we had a drill, no plan for the kid, and the kid was real slow on the crutches, and I was supposed to do. So they're not great, and teachers are often thrown under the bus. When a tragedy does occur, you see it in the news. Well, why did the teacher prop open the door? We're the first ones to be blamed, but there isn't a continuity. There isn't a clear connection and the involvement and empowerment of somebody who it's actually their responsibility to get the kids safely from point A to point B. It's actually infuriating, and I can't understand how we're letting this happen. So I think this is going to be the harder, believe it, like really a hard nut to crack in terms of having more teacher input. I think this is why I'm interested in this law enforcement training. Okay, let us come in then and let us, like be the liaison there for the teachers. Because I've heard folks say, even in the gun violence, like on panels and stuff, well, but there are teachers who don't buy into the whatever the protocol is. Well, some of the protocol is so ridiculous. It makes no sense at all. Like to say, well, if you teach in the west wing of the school, you go out this door, and if you go in a situation, you have to empower your folks to rely on their instincts, because they have everybody on this call knows that there's no way to really plan out something like this, and you have to trust the people who are responsible for the kids' lives to a certain extent, best they can. That was like a long answer that I'm not sure I answered. I do think it's really important though to try, and I think one of the last executive orders, I think, for President Biden was he did like a listening session and about drills, and there was some recommendations that came out of there. And there was a recent JAMA study, I think, that also, or maybe it was in JAMA, but it was a recent study that kind of came up with, here's what we should do with drills. And I just don't know if school districts are looking at those recommendations. But I did want to say, Matthew, that yes, we also have quite a few professors, administrators, librarians, lots of different folks who are, involved in education as part of Teachers Unify. So thanks for those questions.
And I just highlighting to you, even if figuring out a trauma response is hard, we should try, and we should include
try.
Right. We should try. You got to show up for the hard work and include the voices of educators. And you bring up something that I think is so important. What is the impact of a drill on a student with a disability who might be in a special circumstance, and how do we work around that? What do we do for kids who already have some trauma stuff where those drills can kick up their trauma stuff? And there's a comment in the chat from Don about how educators are often the first to notice when kids are struggling emotionally, but are not always included in what solutions look like. So I just wanted to highlight Don's comment as something that I think really gets at what you're talking about too, Abby.
Yeah.
And as a final question, and we'll go more to some of the things that are in the chat, some of which you've already touched on. But I would love for you to reflect on if folks who are with us in this space took one thing away from your talk today about what we can do to help schools in their trauma response to these incidents, what would that be?
Well, I do want to especially thank you, Ruth, for mentioning even the way you think about these tragedies that involve school communities. I saw that reflected in your posts about what happened in Rhode Island, and I think that's huge. You are all on this call because you care very deeply about gun violence prevention, and I think for the teachers in your lives and for in your communities to just start asking questions I know you already ask, being aware of what's up on the school going on in the school board, what's being discussed. And who knows, maybe we, even in those little conversations that you have in communities, you can get secure storage secure firearm storage education, like given out through the school district. I really believe that can happen, and then we can normalize the locking up of guns, which would save so many lives if 3/4 of school shooters get their guns from home or from a friend or a relative. And I think it's a response. It's not only something that the school district should do, but it's they're responsible for doing that. I think and so if we can get to the point that we're normalizing, I just want to say something about the retired teachers, as it was on one of the slides, but we have two chapters right now of led by retired teachers, one in Ithaca, New York, and one in Newtown, Connecticut. Super proud of this. That they're going to try to get their districts. So Ithaca's been trying for a couple of years now. It's not easy, as everybody knows on this call, to get the Ithaca Unified School District to give out periodic information on this. But now we also have a Newtown. So retired teachers, there's tremendous power, because they don't have to worry about their parents of the students in their class. They don't have to worry about any backlash or if they're going to get in trouble for doing something. And super smart, super badass, like teachers at heart. So look out for more from retired teachers from Teachers Unify.
Amazing. And I'm going to put a quick plug in for our friends from Grassroots for GVP, which is one of our member orgs. They've been championing a bill here in Massachusetts that would address the safe storage education. And we can send that information out to folks after this presentation too, so you can know more about that, because there are people who have been hard at work on that very policy here in Massachusetts, and I want to lift up the work that they have been doing as well.
Amazing.
We're going to get to some action steps too. I'm just going through the chat. I know you've touched on some of the questions and comments. There was a question about whether Teachers Unify educates folks on ERPOs in school settings. Just want to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. This is, I think, something that we've been talking a little bit with folks at Everytown who work primarily on ERPO in states, and like crafting the messaging that's like easily tangible. And I think this is the issue, that people don't even know what the state laws are. We know that's a problem with ERPO. In fact, I posted something recently about even referring to ERPO, and my former school counselor friend of mine texted me and said, I didn't even know we had that. I didn't even know we had that in Connecticut. So if the school counselors don't know, the teachers don't know, and why couldn't they just be in the teacher's lounge, where there are all these, information on all sorts of stuff there. So I think this is a huge undertaking, but a really important one. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to go back to my friend there at Everytown who can maybe craft some state specific language, like almost for educators, for school staff, that we could just try to get into teachers lounge. It'd be a start.
Yeah, here in Massachusetts, the legislation we got passed in 2024 included an expansion of ERPO petitioners to include medical providers, mental health providers, as well as school administrators.
Great.
So the question's timely. We should for sure be talking about that more. I'm just looking at the chat to make sure we at least touched on comments and questions. I also want to acknowledge that we're welcoming some other folks from both Connecticut, where you're from, Abby, and also Rhode Island. And just want to acknowledge too, we mentioned that the shooting that happened in Pawtucket at the top of our hour, and just want to wrap our arms around our friends in Rhode Island with what you have been experiencing with that shooting, with what happened at Brown just 2 months before. And just know that all of us in Massachusetts are standing with you as well. I am going to segue into action steps, because we always like for folks to leave these sessions with some things that they can do. And I know, Abby, you had prepared a couple of action steps that you wanted to bring to folks. So I'm going to give you the floor again.
Yeah, I think when we first launched Teachers Unify, I thought it would really just be teachers, and school staff. Like I didn't think about allies. And what surprised me most when we first launched is how many people have teachers in their family. Of course they do. And how much they worry about people who are teachers in their family. And I know on this call, some of you, this is some of you. And so I think sharing about Teachers Unified to people in your family and in your networks who are educators, that there is a place for them, that they can at least keep informed about what's going on, some initiatives they can get involved in. So that's like the first thing. And I think there's like a sign up if you go to our website, or if Alex is able to put that in the chat, may have already done that. So I think that's one thing, is just kind of spreading the word. And about our team, I had somebody say to me, it kind of hurt, but it's true, like nobody knows about your team. And it's like, oh, but I think we could help so many communities. And I think when people do find out school district, they kind of have it in the back of their minds, or we can do some preventative trainings with them so that, God forbid, if something does happen, either at school or just outside the school gates, that, we could be available to them. So I think spreading the word about the team. And I think, Ruth, like you said, like uplifting educators, asking the questions, are you guys, especially if there's something in the community, how are you all taking care of teachers and staff? I mean, we didn't, Sandy Hook had every resource you could imagine. At the same time, teachers, we had to beg for things that should have happened. For example, there should have been a help, like an aide in every single classroom when we came back, and there wasn't. And so think about, you're putting teachers in back into classrooms where they might have to take a desk out of the class from something that happened over the weekend, and then you expect that teacher to just come in and handle all of those questions from kids. So, oh, thank you for putting all of these. That's a lot of links. Thank you. But some information just on Teachers Unify, and we have a podcast I think may have mentioned. So, and Sarah Lerner, who the teacher is still at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, was there at the time of the tragedy. She is the host of the podcast. So if anybody here is interested in maybe even being a guest, please let us know. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I think those are important action steps. And I cannot underestimate the importance of amplifying the work. And now we would love to enlist you all as ambassadors for amplifying these important messages, but also this important work, so that folks in your communities know that this is happening, that these resources are available, that they have a place to turn to for support around how we show up for school communities and show up in school communities for this work. So I think amplifying is a huge action step unto itself. And on the coalition side, we also wanted to share some action steps I mentioned before, the bill that our friends at Grassroots for GVP have been championing to make sure that information about safe storage is being made available in school districts. We can send that information out. We are also busy at the coalition planning for budget season and making sure we're showing up at the State House to champion budget line items that support the work of keeping our communities and our schools safe from gun violence. So please be on the lookout. We're going to be doing some lit drops, or we're going to be doing a quarterly meeting in the State House in May to bring folks together to talk about how we support budget line items. We cannot do this work without robust funding. So showing up for that is really important. We have 5 line items that we support at the coalition. I'll just mention them, but we'll be sending out some more information soon. The Safe and Successful Youth Initiative, DPH's Neighborhood-Based Gun Violence Prevention Program, other DPH violence prevention grants, summer jobs for at-risk youth, which is a huge part of the solution to youth violence. Access to employment is absolutely a protective factor. recidivism reduction for youth and young adults returning to the community after being justice involved. There's also a piece that we're working with our partners at the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute and other member orgs around support services for survivors of homicide victims. All of those things are interrelated. Just how we fund services in the community impact how folks show up in school settings. So it's all really connected. So we'll be asking folks to show up with us at the State House to advocate for these line items. And lastly, as I think folks know, the legislation I referred to earlier that we got passed in 2024, which expands ERPO petitioners, as we mentioned, which regulates ghost guns, looks at crime gun data analysis, so many pieces of policy that keep our community safe. That law is now under threat of a ballot repeal or repeal through a ballot initiative. And I also chair the committee that is working to protect that legislation called Vote Yes for a Safe Massachusetts. And so another thing for people to be aware of is the need to show up at the ballot box in November to protect this legislation. And we'll be having a lot more activity around that work coming up very, very soon as well. We will be sending all this information out to folks in a subsequent email. So you didn't need to take notes about any of this. We got you. So look for that communication coming out soon. And I want to end with gratitude. We have just a few minutes left. So I want to thank you, Abby, for being a partner in this work in all of the ways, for taking your time to be with us today. Again, for the gift that you gave us of your story and your experience. So thank you. So if we can just all appreciate Abby and all of her work for a moment. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Thank you for your kindness and for your support. And for your friendship. And thank you all for being here and your great questions and the engagement. Really appreciate it. Because even though I was a teacher for 32 years and talked in front of little people my whole life, but it's always different with adults, so I do. I really appreciate the kindness. You can really feel this camaraderie here, even through the Zoom and through with the snowstorm. So thank you all. Really kind.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's really, it's our coalition community. And thanks to all of you who are part of our coalition community or are new to our coalition community who came to this conversation today. And I also would acknowledge, you touched on the statement that we had released last week. And that really came together because a lot of brains and hearts came together to work on that. Our staff, some of our board leaders, folks in some of our partner organizations. And I just say that as an example of how it's so important that we all come together in community at those moments to support each other, to think about how we talk about things and to figure out how the work moves forward. And so I do want to shout out our terrific staff at the coalition. I want to acknowledge again Alex Pereira, who's our education specialist, who does the work of putting these programs together and had to join a little bit more remotely than usual because of technical difficulties due to this fun little blizzard that we had. But this is really about community and folks coming together. So thank you all for coming together with us today. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon.